Well, today is Saturday. I believe it's the 9th of April. Another lovely day in northwest Pennsylvania. As you can see, we have no shortage of mud, but that's to be expected on a farm. Wanted to go over the rear mainframe lubricating system again and show you a couple things I found when I was looking at it. All right, here's the replacement mainframe in its current state. I tend to search the internet for information on these big whites, and I did come across an interesting post on Ag Talk by Matt 2155 in 5/14/2016. He had a white 4175 and he lost lubrication pressure all of a sudden in his rear mainframe. He took the hydraulic housing off, and he found that, well, this is the pump out of the rear end that we're replacing. This nut had come loose and dropped off the dip tube, same as I found when I took mine apart. However, I didn't explore the possibilities of putting that back on and tightening it because of all the damage and wear we found in the original rear end. But he was able to, he must have taken some lines off, probably the bearing lube line and the pressure line from the pump off, and I believe you probably could get your hand down in there far enough. If you had someone that had small hands, you could get down in there. It's really hard to see. That's why I brought this old one out. But this part of the screen lays across the mainframe, and he was able to fish this up and get this tightened up. I did check this one. I borrowed a crow's foot. I believe it's an inch and a 1/16 or 3/16. I'll double check on that, see what size this nut is. Well, after much searching, I found the crow's foot I bought. It is an inch and a 1/16. If you were doing this, you might want to have a flare nut crow's foot, maybe a 12 point. I'm not sure you can get in there and get enough turns to go from flat to flat with this wrench. I was able to use this to get in there and finally torque that as hard as I could get it. But apparently someone else has had the same problem, so he expressed in his post that he hoped he could save someone else some aggravation, and I just thought I'd relay that information along. Now in the 4 150s, the 175 had a gear drive. This is the pump drive, pump shaft, and then this is an idler. And then the pump, you press that plunger down and you can slide it in, or if you press it down you can rotate the pump. Now on the 4 150s, I believe the shaft of the oil pump is eccentric to the diameter of the pump body, so that as you rotate the pump, you're moving the shaft of the oil pump either closer or farther away from, there's a sprocket here instead of a gear. The latest updates on the 4 150, they went through 2 iterations of chains with connecting links, and the last part they offer was an endless chain. So I believe if you would, on this pump, of course this isn't the 150, but if you disconnected the pickup and the output, you could then depress the plunger, which is don't know if you can see it right down there in that hole. And you could rotate the pump a little bit to put the chain on. Now, to get the chain on, you would have to pull the front, or the PTO shaft, out of the front of the, that'd be this bearing. It's held in with 3/8 bolts and your lube line. So you could pull that out far enough, you could get the chain on, rotate the pump in, put the PTO shaft back in, and reconnect your lines. So I believe that is how they you would approach that job on a 4150. I'm just speculating, but it looks to me like that might be the way to do it. I did find some interesting things. I had mentioned before, they do have orifices in these lines. Now, I never really covered how the system works entirely, but the oil comes out of the pump. That's this tube. After it's drawn out of the sump into the pump and comes out of the output tube, which is enters the side of the main frame, and it just goes straight through. And it comes out here where the filter goes. It exits right here. That's just a hole. It goes through. You probably can't see, but I can see the ends of the fittings. And it goes to the lube filter, which I don't have on here, but all of these spin-ons, I think most every filter, the oil travels from the outside in. So this is the return back into the main frame. Now they do, and that goes through, connects to this line. And that's the delivery. You have one line that goes back to the PTO housing and lubricates the bearings and the yeah, the clutches are operated off of the hydraulic pressure. So there's two separate oil that are kept separate that make that thing work. So your T goes back to there, and then it's let me get on the other side again. And it comes up to the first T, which feeds this bearing for the PTO shaft. Comes up to the second T, which has two spray nozzles, which spray oil down onto these gears that drive the PTO drive. And there's a hole I pointed out before. You can just see that conical hole right there that feeds oil into the bottom set of bearings on that shaft. And then the oil continues out and passes through and goes through that tube where it loops in and lubricates the front bearing on the PTO shaft drive. I mentioned before, there's 3 orifices in the system. There's an orifice here, and an orifice here, and there's a third orifice. There is a vertical shaft that is, or hole that is drilled. It runs from the top all the way down to the pinion or bull gear housing. I can show you that on the frame we have apart. So there's the plug, and they have 2 Allen screws where they drill into that vertical hole, and then it exits right here where the pinion for the bull gear is mounted. And from there mates up with a hole that is in the housing of the bowl gear pinion, and that feeds into the inside where the shaft of the differential assembly is inserted into. And the differential assembly has a hole that is drilled through the shaft down to the one of these shafts is countersunk into this shaft, and it has a hole that comes up and feeds oil around to the other 3 spider gears. And I believe the this hole is considered the 3rd orifice. The book calls for 90 thousandths. It might be a little bit bigger than 90 thousandths. Unless they've step drilled it. I can't get that in there. Well, that seems, well, that's what the manual says. And at the top of that drilled port is a relief valve. This is where the relief oil comes back into the rear main frame. And underneath this plug there's a spring and a plunger, which when the pressure reaches a certain point, I believe it's supposed to be about 45 pounds, something like that. That valve will open and relieve the pressure. Now these are the 2 orifices that are on top here. This one is in this fitting, and this is it. You can see the end's been soldered up and drilled. Now when I took this apart, on my old one, this one was plugged. I believe I'm going to take these 2 apart and check them. Now this other is the tube that comes out, sprays oil. There's 2 holes drilled in the bottom of it. There's 1, there's 2. Okay, they're pretty far apart. And then they also have a 60 thousandths hole drilled in them. So if you ever have it this far apart, it might be wise to check those to make sure they're clear.